Oh, cool. Well, we're live. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone joining.
Sid, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Sid Malia. I'm an actor and mental health, I'd say, advocate. I think that's the right word. And yeah, just happy to be here and to chat all things mental health related. And yeah, excited.
Hi, everyone. My name's Deborah Smith. We'll just wait a second for everyone to hop on, and then we'll introduce ourselves again. But I'm also an actor and a producer and a mental health advocate. Both Sid and I are in LA. Are you in LA, Sid?
I am here enjoying the rain.
Yeah, I know. It's so beautiful today.
Strange. Yeah, it is nice.
And how are you doing with quarantine and everything?
I'm actually okay. I've kind of enjoyed it. I think that, yeah, I've spent, I think it's been giving me a lot of time to focus on all this mental health stuff, which has been great.
Mm-hmm.
And you?
Yeah, great. Same, actually. Yeah. So we're a minute in. Let's just introduce ourselves again really quick, just for anyone who's hopping on. And then we're here today to talk about mental health and the entertainment industry. Both of us are in entertainment. And I think because that can really have an impact on our mental health, the way that we can reach other people through storytelling, and just the way that both of us have decided to build platforms in order to talk about mental health. Because as you were saying before, and I completely agree, this is, one of the best things is to be able to reach people and talk about the importance of mental health and mental illness awareness. So again, my name is Deborah Smith. I'm an actress, producer in LA, mental health advocate. Take it away, Sid.
Amazing. I'm Sid Malia. I am an actor and producer as well, based in Los Angeles, and also a mental health advocate.
Fabulous. So to start us off, we'll just spitball questions. If you have any questions for me, we're just gonna do a dual interview style thing here. So do you want to tell me a little background about how you first got involved with this, if this is something that has been important to you since you were a child, or if it's recent, or what your story is?
Yeah, I think my real awareness with mental health started when I went to drama school in the UK, and it was sort of towards the end of the year in 2016 that I had some personal things going on, and I realized when I was at school, and this was, it's a British sort of conservatoire where you're performing in some way or another from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. So I think whatever issues I had going on were there, but they were getting covered because I was constantly busy. And being at drama school, it brought up a lot of emotions in me, because that's what these places do. They try and open you up. And I think then when I finished the year, the masters, I suddenly had my outlet taken away, but the problem still persisted. And it was then that I was like, I need to start looking at myself and dealing with things. And I realized that a lot of, like with most people that suffer from mental health things, a lot of what I was going through stemmed from things that happened to me when I was younger, in my childhood. And I think it was at that point that I was like, okay, it's time now to kind of rewind the tape, if you like, and go back and do the digging and the investigating into what is causing me the sort of distress that I have today. And then, I went through various things, and I was able to then share my story with a lot of people. And as we all know, mental health still has a little bit of a stigma attached to it, especially more with an elder generation, because when they were growing up, probably our parents, grandparents generation, I mean, you talked about mental health, they would legitimately think that you were nuts, right? That was sort of there's no one talking about it. But then realizing today that more people were willing to talk about it, I was like, okay, well, if I can share my experiences with others, maybe that'll help inspire others to start talking about it, which I did. Especially, I'm from India originally, and I've got a decent audience back in India. And it was so nice to see how many of the youth in India which I'll just quickly tell you. I know I'm talking too much now, but there's like a statistic that 70% of India is under the age of 30. And this is a country of 1.4 billion people. I mean, that's a crazy number. So it was really nice to see the youth acknowledge and sort of identify with what I was talking about. And that's when I realized that it's now time to continue spreading the word and the message to get it out there. And how about yourself?
That's really fascinating. I don't have any statistics.
No,
but hi everyone who's joining us. Thanks for joining us. So similarly, I'm definitely someone who just always keeps busy and always has my life very planned. I'm definitely have some tendencies to like really push things on track. I like don't know how to not push myself 100% of the time and like have a plan at all times. And a year ago, pretty much actually to the date, I had some stuff happen that completely made my life plan explode in a way that I never thought possible. My like fairy tale, marriage and life exploded, and I completely lost my purpose. Like I had no idea what I was doing, why I had a purpose for life. And thankfully, I was self-aware enough to know that I was getting into a really dark place and that it was dangerous. And so I started to do things that I knew were going to at least help me get out of bed every day. And so for me, that was walking with my dog in the mountains and around LA. And I was listening to a podcast with Zachary Levi, and he was talking about how he was suicidal about a year before he filmed Shazam. And that like blew my mind because he's an actor who I, really admire. He's like such a huge mental health advocate. And to hear someone with that level of, notoriety and fame be so hopeless as well, I was like, wow, that really connected for me. So similarly to, what you said, it was really, just like hearing him share his story really made me feel so much better. And I found it ironic that the thing that really helped pull me out of the darkness was a podcast. It wasn't, I'm a huge advocate for, therapy. I have a therapist that I love, but thank you. So, that was, I thought that was really important. The fact that, I was so touched by this podcast. So I decided to build More Than You See, which is my mental health organization, which is focused on non-traditional resources. So, right now we're doing a digital art show for Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May, which is why the Mighty is doing this. And so over on our platform, I'm sharing, different artistic pieces from people to like tell their own story in their own way. And that's what More Than You See is all about, is building your own mental health toolkit from non-traditional resources to help pull people out of the darkness. And that's how you and I met, because you have a video series that you did a little blurb on More Than You See's art show. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. It's a series that I've done called Consider This. It's 5 episodes of around 10 minutes each. And in each of the episodes, I talk about sort of a mental health condition, if you like, or something that's had a mental health impact on my life. And I just share in a very open and transparent manner how it affected me and little things that I did to kind of help myself along the way. And the idea, I think what I found is that, and it's very funny what you mentioned about Zachary Levi, is that a lot of the time, all it takes for someone else to be open to share their own story is to know that someone else is open to share their story. Yeah. And that's what you found. And what I thought is that if I can just be honest and open, not preachy, I'm not here to preach or to tell anyone that this is how you do it, but it's just to share in an open manner. This is what I went through. This is what I did to help myself. And you know what, if there's anything in this which you relate to or can help you, then great. some of the things I talk about was depression and anxiety that I suffered and taking antidepressants in 2016. Why I stopped drinking alcohol, because it was giving me a lot of anxiety, and I was using it for the wrong reasons. One episode is, and this is actually my favorite one, is about living with OCD as a serious mental disorder. I think that, OCD is one of those things that kind of gets thrown around where people are like, oh, I'm so OCD, without actually realizing just what a severe, distressing mental condition it is. So I talk about that and how that has really affected me since I was a kid. The others are sort of dealing with vulnerability. Being a boy who grew up in a British boarding school. I went to boarding school when I was 10 years old. I'm 33 now. You're conditioned at that age not to show vulnerability. And so it was about sort of realizing how much power and strength there actually is in vulnerability, and sort of rewiring myself to realize that. And the final one was on loneliness issues, because I'm an only child. I had parents who divorced when I was very young. And without realizing it, that had a big impact on my life. And I've been someone who's always craved that stability and wanting to be a part of something, and needing people around me. And I realized that stemmed from when I was young. And I think being able to revisit my childhood and deal with that ties into how I've actually been okay to deal with the isolation that's going on now quite well. Because if this had happened 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been a mess.
I've actually thought about that as well. If this would have happened last year for me, when I was still going, I've done a lot of work this year to like get to the person that I am now in order to, be strong through everything and get through, all of my own personal issues. But I talked to my therapist the other day that if this was a year ago, it would have been really difficult. So for anyone out there who is experiencing loneliness, and, I'm by myself with my dog, quarantining, and I'm still quarantining and will be for the foreseeable future. There definitely are resources out there. I encourage you to go watch Sid's video about loneliness. And, I have some resources up on my site about loneliness, and the Mighty does as well. There is resources out there. And I think that it's so important to, highlight those stories and storytelling in these like non-traditional manners, because I think that they really they're sort of like sneaky like ways to like learn about yourself, like it's, I've really found podcasts where I like listen to it and I'm like, oh man, I've just learned a lot about myself in the last hour. And I had, it's amazing. Is there any resources that have really helped you either through this past month or just in general the past couple of years?
Well, I think it's funny what you say is that, even listening to something like a podcast can help you. I think it comes down to changing your mentality, right? Once you surrender and realize that you want to make a change, or you want to seek help for yourself, suddenly you start finding answers and help in absolutely everything.
That's true.
Things that have always been there for you, right?
Yeah.
But suddenly you've now changed your perspective and you start seeing things in a different light. Talking about that, it's so random. There's a show on Netflix called Sex Education. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a British comedy. You've seen it?
Yeah.
And it's in one of the episodes in season 1, they're in the church, and the pastor is talking about, he says the famous Bible quote, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," which we've all heard. And I think we've all been brought up to believe that love thy neighbor as thyself means treat others nicely.
Yeah.
But the pastor in the show goes on to say, love thy neighbor as thyself. Love thyself. How can you love thy neighbor as thyself if you don't first love yourself? And, I'm watching a Gillian Anderson comedy on Netflix.
Right.
And that has been one of the most profound things, just by watching it in that scene, that has ever hit me in my life. And it's so in tune with what you're saying, that it can be a podcast, it can be something so, I guess, non-traditional.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be with a therapist. It doesn't have to be from self-help books. It can be from all these other mediums that if you're open to receive,
right,
you start noticing a lot of things coming to you, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point, because it definitely, I was listening to the Armchair Expert podcast. I don't know if you listen to that, Dax Shepard's podcast, and his co-host did a 10-episode thing on dating in Los Angeles, and if I would have listened to that 6 months ago, I would have been like, nope, not nope. But listening to it now, it was like it was valuable to me. But I also want to say that I think that additionally, it's also depends on the type of learner that you are and the type of the way that you receive information best.
Sure.
Because and it's interesting because when I first created More Than You See, one of the reasons was because I was telling my friend who was also just going through some difficult stuff. And I was telling her, I was like, you have to listen to this podcast episode. It was so wonderful. You're really going to love it. And she was like, I hate podcasts.
Yeah. Then.
So it's interesting because with More Than You See, we have books, articles, TED Talks, other videos, any of that sort of stuff. And when people share stories on our Instagram and then they go to the site, it also shares those. I ask someone what is one thing that has helped you, and it usually is some random quote or a meme that they saw something somewhere that touched them. I think it's so important to not discount those things in our life. But you're right, you have to be open to receive it and know that you're in the place to start seeing that stuff. That's totally true.
I think that's the main thing. I think with anything, I mean, not just with self-help, with mental health, with anything really, that you can go and see as many therapists and spiritual teachers and books and treks and go and move to Tibet and become a monk. You can do all of this stuff as much as you want, but it first has to come from within.
Yeah. If
you are not 100% committed to, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I think, and we see this a lot. We see a lot of, I think a lot of people pick up self-help books or stuff and they're like, this is all a load of nonsense, and they throw it away.
Yeah.
The reason is usually it's because they've gone into it already with a mindset of, I'm going to resist this.
Yeah.
Whereas you need to completely let go of any inner resistance. And it might not work for you. By all means, every self-help book cannot help. It's going to resonate with different people. But you at least have to go through it with that surrendered state within and that open mind that, okay, this could work.
Yeah. I'm curious if, so you left India when you were 10 to go to boarding school?
No, I grew up in I was born here in LA, funnily enough. And then I moved to England when I was 9 months old.
Okay.
Grew up there my whole life. Parents split when I was 6. My dad his business was in India, so he wasn't really there much. And then I went to boarding school when I was 10. Went to university in London, went to India for a year because I was meant to go into the family business like many good Indian boys are meant to do. Tried it, didn't enjoy it, and then left and came here made the most of that American passport that I had from birth and came back over here and pursued the arts.
That's awesome. That's cool. So do you find it what do you think mental health is like in the UK versus the US? Do you see a difference?
I think in general it's getting better worldwide. I think that, I mean, fortunately, the Mighty hosting people like us to talk about this on a Monday afternoon, it's nice. And, we're very blessed that people are tuning in to watch this, shows that there's an interest in it and that people are open to spreading the message about mental health. And I think it's getting there slowly but surely. I don't know, and maybe you'd be able to answer this because you grew up here, but
yeah,
definitely in the UK and I'm 33, as I said, when I grew up in the UK, when you were in school, there was no care given to mental health or any of this stuff. It wasn't there. But fortunately today, I remember visiting my old school Wellington College, and the headmaster was like, we were really interested in making these kids the best academics or the best rugby players and sports players. But he's like, we've got this all wrong, because there's no point being the best athlete in the world, the best, getting straight A's, if we haven't looked after their mental well-being. Because by the time they leave here at 18 and go to college, that's when they're at the place where they need to be formed as human beings.
Yeah.
And so it is nice to know that schools are taking this a lot more seriously and adding active things into the curriculum to look after mental well-being.
Yeah.
How about here?
I have a stat for you, actually. So
here we go.
So it's interesting what you said about, like our formative years are 18 and that sort of stuff. Did you know that our brains don't fully develop until we're 25?
Wow, no, I had no clue.
Yeah, so this is something that I learned on a podcast, and I've shared it on my site in relationship to addiction and drug use and all that sort of stuff, because it was basically like this this brain doctor was talking about how like why child stars, so many of them end up, going into drugs. And the reason is because, when we go out on stage, when we get praise, something like that, and especially as an actor, your serotonin levels spike, and it makes you happy, and, like your brain is firing that, like, this is joy. And when that starts and you're such a young child, then your level of normalcy is higher than someone else. And that's why people go into drugs, because like a lot of child stars, because they get that same reaction level.
Rush, right.
Yeah, that same rush, which I thought was just so fascinating. And listening to that, I was like, why aren't we talking about this? Like, this is so, it's so important to highlight the ways that our brains work, like why we react to things the way that we do, like it's so important to know, that like we have a tribal mentality as people, because we want to, a lot of people want to be in a group, because that's the way that our ancestors were in order to survive. If you lived by yourself, you would die, and so it's so important to like, focus on those facts about, us as humans in our DNA, because that says so much about us. I think it's really fascinating, but yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think these are the really, honestly, I've been thinking about this more. So I read a book, Conversations with God. I don't know if you've read it, but which is life-changing, changed my life. And I recently did this OCD workbook, which has really helped me get through the OCD. Those two pieces of material are possibly the most profound, life-changing and educational things that I've ever read in my life. More than any math, geography, science, and there are people on this who will probably say, but honestly, that's what I really think needs to be, it's great. We should teach kids history and math and science and all this sort of stuff, but that you just have to, in today's day and age, exactly like as you said, add in something into the curriculum which helps these young kids understand just how the brain of theirs is wired to function.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So they don't end up falling into habits later in life, trying to chase a high, which was an artificial high in the first place.
Right, for sure. And I think it's even just like an awareness, because then it's a choice, then it's, I mean, I don't mean with drugs, but I mean like, like whatever, the way that we react to things, if it's just if it's not a conscious choice, then we're just reacting because this is in our DNA, and we're, like that's one way. But if we can actually be cognizant of the decisions that we're making, because we understand our brains, that's just so much more powerful. It's interesting, like talking about, growing up in LA and all that sort of stuff. And by the way, if anyone has questions for us or would like to make comments about what we're saying, oh, thank you. You love my t-shirt. I got this shirt last year at a mental health fundraiser. Someone makes them and was selling them. And I was like, that is my shirt for sure. if you actually go to if you go to More Than You See's Instagram or my Instagram, I tag the person who sells these a lot, and I'll make sure to tag it today. That way, if anyone wants to buy one from her, obviously I don't get anything from it. I just think it's really awesome. So I'll definitely tag her. Anyways, so yeah, growing up in LA, and then I actually lived in Australia for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And the difference between Australia and America is really big, I think, with mental health and with just discussing difficult subject matters in general. I think that, you know, Australians are very, and I'm going to be completely stereotyping and going to say some generalizations here, but I think a lot of Australians are very lackadaisical and very like greasy, and that is what they like, that is their story, and they're sticking to it. And so they are like, they force that you know, lackadaisical quality, even if it's at detriment to themselves. And I definitely think that there was you know, definitely some people that I met that were, yeah, it was really difficult for them to discuss difficult subject matters. I was also working in construction, so that was also part of it.
Right.
Definitely different than you know, being in the entertainment industry. But I think that, you know, I really found it different. And also, you know, like the way that Australia works is similar to the UK as far as, you know, they finish school at grade 10 unless they want to go to university, and then they do 11 and 12 as college, and then uni after, you know, and for us, it's obviously through 12th grade. So for them, they're potentially exiting school at 16.
Yeah.
And then like going into the workforce. And I think that also, you know, certainly has an impact on, you know, how they see themselves, what, you know, because I think we often take external validation in order to, you know, feel good about ourselves, which is obviously what, you know, work, like self-work is all about, is doing the love thyself first instead of looking for that external validation. But yeah, I mean, I went to a private Jewish day school and like until I was in 7th grade, and then I went to a public school, and the difference between Jewish day school and public school was pretty big. But I was also, you know, I was in drama, you know, for 6 years. So I think, you know, us drama kids, we love to show emotion, whether they're realistic or not. So
Yeah.
I think that yeah, it's interesting. But
Very cool. I will ask you this though, someone who obviously knows far more about America as I do. I feel in LA, one can have these sorts of discussions and can talk about mental health, you know, because LA is very artistically inclined, and sort of very open to I would think, to these sorts of discussions. How much would you say though that this is a representation of America? Like LA might be very open to talk about mental health, but do you think that that's something that's widespread in the US? Because one thing I realize is that when you talk about America compared to the UK, is that, I mean, the UK is the size of California.
right.
America in itself is basically a continent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very good point. You know, and I mean, LA is certainly a bubble. I've had the pleasure of, you know, filming in other cities. And it's always interesting to talk to the locals there. It actually, you know, one thing I've realized is that, you know, cities that have infrastructure and education around things like mental health, obviously, you know, the conversation is there and the knowledge is there, so people are willing to have the conversation. In any rural area, whether that is, because I mean, when I worked in construction, it was I was in the outback, and like the people in the outback and the people in, rural America are often very similar. Thanks for saying that, Rhiannon. So she says that Utah is learning, it's getting better. I mean, I think,
amazing.
Yeah, like it is really, I think that having these sorts of conversations where we're, talking about mental health in an open and honest way and saying like, hey, it's cool to talk about this stuff. I think that that's why storytelling is just so important, Oh, interesting. So Carrie is talking about that they live in rural Ohio. Both her parents have schizophrenia. It's definitely stigmatized. People are talking about depression, anxiety, however, not other mental health issues. Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely that's definitely an issue. And I think the thing is that like as we slowly take on these certain subject matters on television or film or whatever stuff like that, it will slowly start these conversations. But I think it's, honestly, this is why it's so important for me to be an actor is to, do this storytelling. Like I actually have a short film that premiered today called Imogen's Imaginary Friend, and or Imaginary Friends, and it's about a woman who is me. It's a woman who is basically trying to get ready for work, and there's a demon that's following her around that is like the physical manifestation of her anxiety and depression. And we were supposed to premiere at certain film festivals and stuff, but because of COVID, we decided to just put it up online today because of Mental Health Month. And we put it up online 2 hours ago, and I've already had people message me about how they think how they had never thought before about how depression and anxiety could physically manifest in a physical being for someone. And I think that that's just like, it's just an interesting, different way to present depression and anxiety.
It's amazing. And it's so funny that you say that, because when I talk about in my video about suffering from depression in 2016, people ask me, how do you describe it? And I say it in the video. It was like, now, I don't know if anyone watching this or if you are, I'm a big Harry Potter fan.
Yes.
And yes, there is something in Harry Potter called a Dementor, which guards the Azkaban prison. And a Dementor is described as sucking the happiness out of anyone that comes into contact with it.
Right.
And the best way to describe my depression was that I had a Dementor constantly on my shoulder, sucking the happiness out of me.
Yeah.
And I can understand what you're saying, that you can actually physicalize it into something, and it almost is a physical being.
Right. I'm gonna find the link so I can share it so you guys can watch it. Yeah, I mean, it's something that the director and the writer, there you go. So she wrote it. It's something that she's been thinking about for years. This is actually her manifestation of what it looks like for her. And so then she messaged me in like October and was like, I want to film this. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it was amazing because we got a woman who's a like really incredible monster. Like that's what she does as an actor, is she creates monsters. And so when you see it, it actually looks a lot like a Dementor. So that's interesting that you say that. Yeah. What other resources were helpful for you? Like what was your journey like as far as working through everything?
So my therapist has been just everything to me. I think that I always say this with therapy: if it's something that people are looking at doing, don't always jump with the first one. If you can, try a couple of different ones out and find the one that works for you. And I did fortunately find that lady. She's just phenomenal, and she's been a guide to me, and she's helped me really go back and examine my past and let things go. So she's been really my number one thing. The other thing is a lot of these books, like I mentioned, like Conversations with God, the OCD workbook. Meditation has been huge for me. I meditate twice a day, transcendental meditation. I think that's another thing like therapy. try out a couple of ones
Yeah.
before you figure out which one works for you.
Yeah.
And I know you'll like this one, but the thing that's really probably helped me the most is my dog. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think you can never underestimate the power of just having unconditional love from another being.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think just having that rock solid piece of love in my life,
Yeah.
even though, you know, he doesn't speak, he doesn't do anything, or he thinks he does, but it's just having that there and knowing that you have that feeling of unconditional love makes you feel like you can get through anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. My dog is actually named after a Harry Potter character.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, his name
Which
is
one?
Phineas.
Is
Phineas, Mr. Phineas Black.
Phineas?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
The Sirius's like second uncle, who was the one who fought for Muggle rights. He's the one who got blasted off of the carpet in the
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, I know. Dogs are amazing. So switching to your work, like, have you done any projects, you know, besides Consider This that are about mental health, or, you know, what sort of projects do you try to gravitate towards?
Yeah, not yet. Consider This was my first sort of big thing to sort of just tackle specifically mental health.
Yeah.
Now my production company, we actually have a TV show we're developing, and it's kind of like it's Friends but set in modern day Bombay in India.
Oh, cool.
But it's with each of these friends dealing with some kind of mental issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to also say that when we talk about mental health, I think the first thing that a lot of people assume is, oh, depression and anxiety. But mental health has so many different angles to it.
Yeah.
And that's what we try and get across in this series, whether it's body image, body dysmorphia. These are all mental conditions.
Right.
Whether it's pressure to settle down with someone, or, you know, certain people have pressure from parents not to date a certain someone. That is all having a mental toll on people. And these are the sorts of topics that we try and touch in this series that we're developing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I Weigh, the Instagram account by Jamila, she reposted something today that was about, it said 1 in 4 people will suffer from mental illness, but all 4 have mental health, or all 4 need to focus on mental health. And I was like, yes, that's so
True.
So true. Because I think, and you know, going back to our earlier conversation, I think, you know, we don't think about those things as mental health considerations. And so then people just think that, like, they're immune, or that's not, you know, it's not something that they need to worry about. And that's, you know, we always need to focus on those things as well. Yeah. So that's really cool. So what stage of the process are you guys in as far as?
We've been speaking to the platform, and they've been sort of telling us what, you know, with a couple of things. I've got a couple of very big UK comedy writers on board, which is good, because I think the other way to tell, you know, is to tell people that mental health doesn't have to be this dreary, like, sad subject. No, it doesn't. Like, crying is cool. Like, legitimately, like, you can have fun at it. You can joke about it. You can make jokes about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're trying to do is, and I think there's a balancing line, is that how do you make a comedy series about mental health, which doesn't get too serious,
right,
but doesn't get too comedic that you lose the message you're trying to get across. Right. So we're sort of working on that balance at the moment.
That's wonderful. That's a really cool balance. Yeah.
So
how have you know, just like being in the entertainment industry, how have you felt that has helped or hindered your mental health journey?
It's changed my life. It's amazing. And I can honestly say that, like, getting into acting for me, I'm an only child, so I've got a wild imagination. So it gives me an opportunity to use that creation, you know, in a constructive manner. The other thing for me is that, you know, why I love being a part of this industry and, like, being on set or something like that. I'm one of those guys that, even if I'm not shooting, I'd love to just stay and watch. because I just love being around people. Like I'll make friends with absolutely everybody on the set, no matter who it is. And I want to chat to people because that sense of community is the closest thing that I can get that reminds me of boarding school.
Yeah.
And boarding school for me was the closest thing I ever had to a stable family, coming from divorced parents when I was so young. So it really, really has helped me a lot in that regard.
That's so, okay. See, this is why this stuff is important, because I just realized that, because I mean, I'm not an only child. I have a younger sister, but my parents divorced when I was 5, and I had a very unstable, childhood. I mean, my parents did the best that they can. Sorry, guys, if you're listening, but it was definitely difficult in many, many ways, and acting really does the same for me. I'm the same on set. I want to know everyone's name and their pet's name and what's their favorite flavor of ice cream. And I just love, but it's just the camaraderie of that, relationship that you're able to build, on set.
Yeah. And knowing, I think that all of you are also working towards a common goal as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's something, I've also listened to a podcast that was talking about, why people who work from home, this was before quarantine, but people who work from home and why that's so difficult, and why it's important to, set your goals for the day. Because again, going back to caveman times, when you were in a tribal situation, you had your duty, you had your one thing that you were doing for the day, and that was, ingrained in you. And now the way that we just don't necessarily have our thing that we're working towards, that can, make people scattered and not have a central focus for things.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Actually, coming on to that, and something you said at the beginning, I wanted to ask you is that you talked about how you're someone that likes routine, right? And a structure. But how important within that, because I'm also someone like you who struggled with this, and that if I don't do the routine, then I almost feel guilty, beat myself up for not appreciating it. And I think that can obviously also cause, you can be so specific and put so much pressure on yourself that you end up being your own worst enemy in trying to be the best version of yourself. So flexibility is also very important within having rigid constructs. There also has to be an element of flexibility. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, completely. And, I think it's interesting because I think it changes depending upon, what the rigidity is based around. I think that if going back to, acting, being on set, I'm definitely not an actor who comes to set and I'm like, this is the character, I'm sticking to it, I'm not changing that. I'm actually very directable. And, that's something I love, is that collaborative aspect of building a character, where it's about other people's opinions and, ideas around the character and sort of building that. And that shows a lot of flexibility. But when it comes to, my life and how I wanted it planned, and even my diet or, stuff like that, I've been working really hard with my therapist to let that go. And I think another, part of More Than You See is when it's not mental health month, when people are just sharing stories, the whole idea is that these masks that we wear and these, faces that we put on to hide what's actually going on inside, that's the, one of the big ideas behind More Than You See, is to take away that mask and to show that vulnerable internal side of yourself. And I think that's something that I've also worked really hard to try and be authentic and be true, because I have always been known as the happy, comedic, preppy, this is, but that's not me 100% of the time. And I've worked really hard to try and show other sides of myself and encourage other people to do the same, because that, that is that taking away those rigid ideas about ourselves.
I think it's what you mentioned that as well. When you are the sort of the happy one in the group or the cheerful one, and everyone's like, "Oh, Deborah's always going to be smiling."
Right.
When you're not, even for a split second, it's like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong? What's
Right.
wrong? Is everything okay?" And it's like, "Yeah, everything's fine. It's just that, once in a while, we're also allowed to not be smiling."
Right. For sure.
And that's completely normal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was, when I was super depressed and did not have, like, I didn't know what my purpose was in life. That was why it hit me so hard, because it was such a contrast from the way that I am, normally. And so it was like, thankfully that was very triggering for myself to be able to be like, wow, this feels not like, this is not what I normally feel like. Let's dive into why. And it sort of set off siren bells, honestly, where I was like, okay, I'm getting to a place where I don't want to go. I need to figure out how to pull myself out of this, because this is not, me. But yeah, it's interesting. And so when your Sundance shirt, so what project
Yes.
did you Sundance with?
This was a film called Brahman Amon, which is kind of, I guess it's kind of like an American Pie-esque film that's set in 1970s Bangalore, India.
Ah.
And actually it does have a mental health angle to it, which sadly did get lost, I think, in the aftermath of the film. But the film Brahmin, so Brahmin is a caste in the Indian religious Hinduism. And there's still, there are different castes in Hinduism, and some are seen as supposedly higher up than others. And, this is based on archaic laws from thousands of years ago. But still today, people try and think that if they belong to a certain caste, then they're better than others. And it still causes a lot of issues in society today. And this kind of did highlight that a little bit. And how, even things like religion can have mental health impacts on people.
Yeah, definitely. What was your background with that?
With religion? I struggled a little bit, actually, because I'm technically a Hindu. My mother's a Muslim who had to convert to marry my dad. But then I went to a Christian school my whole life, going to chapel and singing hymns every morning.
Right.
And I used to constantly have this fear of, like, if I'm not perfect, I'm going to get punished by God.
Yeah.
And it was only very recently till I realized a lot of that was tied to my OCD. And I was then I guess sort of cutting myself off from religion out of fear, as opposed to having a good relationship with it.
Yeah.
And now it's at a place where it's sort of, again, after reading that Conversations with God, it's kind of got to a place where it's like something I'm happy, like, you don't have to conform to a specific religion, but it just kind of takes the pressures off it.
Yeah.
So yeah, religion has been something that I've struggled with in my life because of this fear of God, if you like. Whereas now, at least, I've learned that you don't fear God, befriend God, kind of thing.
Right. It's interesting because I think, so many people are becoming atheist, or they tag themselves as atheist or agnostic or whatever. And I think that, I don't think that is disconnected from people being more aware of themselves and their feelings and their community and all those sorts of things. Like, I feel like there has to be some correlation there, because I think, that's just another way that we follow guidelines that may not be helpful to our, own self-worth and stuff like that. And obviously I don't hate religion, but I do think that it can be damaging. And I think that it's interesting that so many people are sort of reimagining their own experience with religion instead of following specific guidelines.
I think the thing with specific guidelines is, everything in the world has evolved. The only thing that has not evolved is religion.
Yeah.
In most cases. And it would be okay if the religious rules were rewritten every 25 years or 50 years to suit the world that we're in. But it's very difficult, I think, to keep believing things that were, we're still trying to practice rules and regulations that made sense 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. But in today's, religion has to evolve like everything else, I believe.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it hasn't, and that's kind of where the sort of the discrepancy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'll give you a quick example right now. We have what they call pundits, which are like the Indian priests.
Mm.
And I remember asking the priest, I was like, you've got all these rules, like you must wash your hands, have a shower, brush your teeth before going into an Indian or a Hindu place of worship. And I was getting very up, like, if I don't do this perfectly, I'm going to get cursed. And the priest said to me, he said, I'll tell you this right now. You find me any religious text where any of this is written. He's like, it isn't. He said, because it's all man-made. He said, if you think 500 years ago, a temple was a place of communal gathering, therefore, it made sense to tell people to have a shower, wash their hands, wash their feet before entering the temple, purely so you didn't spread disease. Right. There's nothing religious about it at all. So all these things we claim are messages of God, he says, have not been written in any religious book.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. That must have been really fascinating to like go to a boarding school that had like such a contrasting religion than the one that you grew up with. Or
yeah, I guess I didn't really grow up being a devout, like a strong, it was instilled in me Hinduism. I think it was more sort of, it was there. But I honestly, I see this now, that my issues with religion came from my own fear of the religion, which stemmed from the OCD.
Interesting.
Which I'm still working on, but getting better at kind of rewiring my beliefs.
Yeah, I want to hear more about this this OCD handbook. What is that? What is it?
It was amazing. My therapist gave it to me. It's called I think it's actually as simple as the OCD workbook or something like that. And you just literally work through it at your own pace. There's things to fill out. But what it did is that it opened me up to realize that how many different facets of OCD there are. You don't have to suffer from all of them. You can suffer from different ones. And what it really helped me realize is that so much of my anxiety and issues could be linked back to certain obsessions that I had and the compulsions that I did to make myself feel better. And it just opened my eyes to how vast an illness it is. Yeah. And how, because I was clinically diagnosed with it by a psychiatrist when I was 29. And I was like, thanks for that, Sherlock. I mean, I could have told you I had OCD before coming here.
Right.
What I didn't realize is just that how broad a spectrum OCD was. And now, at least knowing that a lot of my issues are OCD kind of at least makes me feel better, because at least I know what to focus on. Right. So from that point of view, it's good.
Yeah. It's interesting. I read something the other day that was like, like when you're alone and you're thinking about something, do you think in full sentences or in chopped words?
Yeah.
And it was, I'm totally butchering what it was about, but it was basically about what that says about you as a person, and how your brain functions. And for me, I'm a sentence person, 100%, and that like I will go down so many rabbit holes, where I like have entire conversations with myself about things that I'm just like focusing on, and it's completely nonsensical, but it's just like, I think that basically I think I need to use that workbook. I think
I shall send you the name of it.
Yeah, I would love that. So we have 5 minutes left. So is there anything else you want to like make sure that you touch on?
No, I think we've covered it. How about yourself? About maybe, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing for mental health awareness? Yeah. Mental Health Awareness Month, and the great things you're doing to promote different things through the arts.
Thanks. Yeah. So over on my platform, which is both on Instagram and then also we have a website, More Than You See, we're running a digital art show right now for Mental Health Month. And so I've collected art from around the world. We've got people from New Zealand, from Spain, from the UK. Like, it's really, really incredible. And these people have basically just sent me a piece of art in whatever manner. So like today's was the short film that I did. Yesterday we had someone who does body paint, and she has a poem that she wrote about the body paint that she does. We have a song that's premiering on the 22nd on Friday that a singer-songwriter who's really incredible, and she's premiering this song about her struggle with cocaine addiction and getting through that and stuff like that. And so if anyone has a artistic piece that they would like to contribute, I'm still accepting submissions. Like, we have enough, but I will always take more because I love sharing people's art. So I know I saw Nicole commented at one point. She's someone who reached out. And so, yeah, if you've got a poem, short story, song, anything like that, and we're sharing it over on More Than You See. And I think that it's just really special and important because, again, it just shows people's, in internal selves through art. Like the last Mighty talk that I did was just about art and why art is so important in mental health. And I think that, it's been hugely important for me, to talk about mental health and why, through my art. And so I just want to, really focus on that for other people as well. And again, we should shout out to your Consider This that you're doing. And you're actually now doing where you're interviewing people. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm doing a few lives. I'm trying to put them together just to talk about mental health with people from very different walks of life and how it affects them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with those.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, I guess we'll leave it at that. But it was so lovely to chat with you. We hadn't really gotten a chance to get to know each other, and it was really fun to do it through this platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Thanks everyone for joining us. And
thanks everyone.
Stuff out and reach out. The Mighty is an incredible platform. They've got a lot of really amazing resources, and obviously Sid and I are here as well as mental health advocates, because let's keep this conversation going. It's important.
Yeah.
And crying is cool.
Crying is cool.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.